Step out of the vehicle with your hands visible now. The command cut through the afternoon air like a blade, but something about the voice made Dr. Amara Sterling's blood run cold. She had been driving through the affluent suburbs of Arlington, Virginia, returning from a board meeting where she had just approved funding for 3 new hospitals, when the unmarked sedan had appeared in her rearview mirror with flashing red and blue lights that seemed somehow wrong, somehow too bright, too urgent for a routine traffic stop. The 2 men approaching her black Tesla wore what appeared to be police uniforms, but Amara's trained eye, sharpened by years of navigating corporate boardrooms and a childhood spent around federal law enforcement, caught the inconsistencies immediately. The badges were slightly off-center, the uniforms too new, too crisp, and the way they moved spoke of military training rather than police academy instruction. Most telling of all was the absence of body cameras, dashboard cameras, or any of the standard equipment that legitimate officers would carry in 2024. "Ma'am, we need you to step out of the vehicle immediately," the taller officer repeated, his hand resting on what appeared to be a service weapon. His partner, a stocky man with cold blue eyes, circled around to the passenger side of her car, effectively trapping her between them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty suburban street, and Amara realized with growing alarm that they had somehow maneuvered her into an area with no witnesses, no traffic, no one who might question what was about to happen. "Officers, may I see your identification?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. As the CEO of Sterling Medical Corporation and one of the youngest billionaires in America, she was accustomed to being recognized, to being treated with the deference that came with wealth and influence. But these men looked at her with something that made her skin crawl. Not respect, not even professional courtesy, but the predatory calculation of hunters who had cornered their prey. "You don't get to make demands here," the shorter officer snarled, his mask of authority slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. "You're going to get out of that car, and you're going to do it now, or we're going to drag you out. Your choice, but either way, you're coming with us." The threat was delivered with casual cruelty, and Amara felt the familiar chill of recognition that every successful black woman learned to identify, the moment when her race and gender made her a target rather than a person deserving of basic human dignity. But what these men didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that the woman they had chosen to victimize wasn't just another wealthy target. She was the daughter of FBI Director Marcus Sterling, a man whose influence reached into every corner of federal law enforcement, and she had been raised to recognize danger in all its forms. As the fake officers moved closer, their intentions becoming unmistakably clear, Amara's mind raced through the self-defense training her father had insisted upon, the emergency protocols she had memorized, and the network of protection that surrounded her like an invisible shield. These men had made the mistake of their lives, but they wouldn't realize it until it was far too late to matter. If you believe in the power of justice and the strength that comes from never underestimating the people you choose to target, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see that predators often choose the wrong prey, and subscribe to Acts of Depth for more stories that remind us that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who look like victims until the moment they reveal their true strength. Part 2. The Daughter of Justice. The story of how Amara Sterling became one of America's youngest billionaires began not in boardrooms or investment banks, but in the modest government housing of Quantico, Virginia, where her father Marcus Sterling had raised her as a single parent while building his career from beat cop to the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The irony wasn't lost on her now, as she faced men masquerading as the very profession that had shaped her understanding of justice, that these fake officers had chosen to target the daughter of the man who had spent 30 years hunting down criminals exactly like them. Marcus Sterling had been 25 years old when his wife died in a car accident, leaving him to raise their 3-year-old daughter while working his way through the FBI Academy. Amara's earliest memories were of falling asleep to the sound of her father studying case files at their kitchen table, of being taught to memorize license plates and identify suspicious behavior before she could properly tie her shoes, of understanding that the world contained people who would hurt others simply because they could. "Baby girl," Marcus had told her on her 8th birthday, as he taught her to throw a proper punch in their backyard. "There are 2 kinds of people in this world, those who protect and those who prey. You're going to be strong enough to protect yourself and smart enough to protect others. That's not a choice, that's a responsibility." The lessons had continued throughout her childhood and adolescence, woven into family dinners and weekend activities with the casual precision of a man who understood that knowledge was the best armor he could give his daughter. She learned to read body language before she learned algebra, to identify lies before she mastered chemistry, to assess threats before she understood calculus. By the time she graduated high school as valedictorian, Amara Sterling possessed a skill set that would have impressed seasoned federal agents. But it was her father's influence that had also taught her the value of using power responsibly. When she chose to pursue business instead of law enforcement, Marcus had supported her decision with the understanding that there were many ways to serve justice. Amara had built Sterling Medical Corporation from a single urgent care clinic into a healthcare empire worth $12 billion. But she had done it with the same principles her father had instilled in her: protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and never let the powerful prey on the vulnerable. Now, as the fake officers closed in on her Tesla, Amara felt the weight of those lessons settling on her shoulders like familiar armor. The taller officer was reaching for her door handle, his partner positioning himself to block any escape route, and she could see in their eyes the casual confidence of men who had done this before, who believed they had chosen an easy target. "Last warning," the tall officer said, his hand now resting on her door handle. "Get out of the car, or we'll drag you out and add resisting arrest to your charges." Amara looked at him through her window, her expression calm despite the danger she faced, and made a decision that would change the trajectory of this encounter in ways these men couldn't imagine. Instead of complying or attempting to flee, she did something that caught them completely off guard. She smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile or a submissive one. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that her opponents had made a critical tactical error. The smile of a woman who had been raised by one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country, and who was about to demonstrate exactly what that meant. "Officers," she said, her voice carrying through the closed window with perfect clarity. "Before we go any further, I think there's something you should know about who you've chosen to target today." She reached slowly for her phone, her movements deliberate and controlled, and began to dial a number that would connect her directly to the FBI's Emergency Response Center. But more than that, it would connect her to a network of protection that these fake officers had never encountered, a system of justice that had been 30 years in the making and was about to demonstrate why choosing the wrong victim could be the last mistake a criminal ever made. The phone began to ring, and Amara could see the first flicker of uncertainty cross the tall officer's face as he realized that something about this encounter wasn't going according to plan. His partner was still moving toward the passenger side of the car, but his steps had slowed, his predatory confidence beginning to waver as he sensed that the dynamic of this situation was shifting in ways he didn't understand. What these men didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that they weren't just attempting to kidnap a wealthy businesswoman. They were about to discover what happened when someone targeted the daughter of the FBI director, and that discovery was going to cost them everything they thought they knew about power, authority, and the consequences of choosing the wrong prey. Part 3. The Network Awakens. The phone connected on the second ring, and the voice that answered carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to handling national security crises. "FBI Emergency Response, this is Agent Sarah Chun. How can I assist you?" "Agent Chun, this is Amara Sterling, Director Sterling's daughter," Amara said, her voice steady despite the fake officers now frantically gesturing for her to end the call. "I'm currently being detained by two individuals impersonating federal officers at the intersection of Maple and Elm in Arlington. They're attempting to force me from my vehicle under false pretenses." The effect was immediate and devastating. Agent Chen's voice sharpened with the kind of focused intensity that came from years of training and the understanding that any threat to the director's family was a threat to national security itself. "Ms. Sterling, maintain your position. Do not exit your vehicle under any circumstances. Federal response units are being dispatched to your location immediately." Through her window, Amara could see the tall officer's face cycling through expressions of confusion, anger, and dawning comprehension. He was speaking urgently into what appeared to be a radio, but his movements had become jerky, desperate, as he realized that whatever plan he and his partner had been executing was rapidly falling apart. "Ma'am, end that call right now," he demanded, his earlier professional facade completely abandoned. "You're interfering with a federal investigation." But Amara could hear something else now, the distant sound of sirens, multiple sirens, growing louder with each passing second. Agent Chen's voice continued through her phone speaker, calm and reassuring despite the urgency of the situation. Ms. Sterling, we have your location locked. FBI tactical units are 3 minutes out, with local law enforcement providing additional support. Can you describe the individuals who are detaining you? 2 white males, approximately 30 to 40 years old, wearing what appear to be police uniforms but without proper identification or equipment. Amara replied, her clinical description delivered with the precision her father had taught her. The taller subject has brown hair and is approximately 6'2". The shorter subject is stocky with blonde hair and blue eyes. Both are armed and have positioned themselves to prevent my escape. The fake officers were backing away from her car now, their predatory confidence replaced by the panicked movements of men who had suddenly realized they were trapped. The shorter officer was speaking rapidly into his radio, his voice high with stress as he apparently tried to coordinate with whoever had sent them on this mission. We need to go now, he hissed to his partner. This whole thing is blown. They're coming. But the tall officer seemed frozen, staring at Amara through her window with an expression that mixed rage with disbelief. This isn't possible, he muttered. She's just supposed to be some rich bitch. How does she have direct access to the FBI? The answer to his question was approaching in the form of a convoy of black SUVs that rounded the corner with the coordinated precision of a military operation. The lead vehicle bore the unmistakable markings of the FBI's hostage rescue team, while the others carried the kind of tactical equipment that suggested this response had been elevated to the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Agent Chen's voice continued through Amara's phone, now joined by other voices in the background. Dispatchers coordinating the response, tactical commanders positioning their units, and somewhere in the mix, a voice that Amara recognized with a surge of relief and pride. Amara, baby girl, are you hurt? Amara Sterling's voice cut through the radio chatter with the authority of a man who had just mobilized half of the FBI's Washington field office to protect his daughter. Talk to me, sweetheart. Are you safe? I'm safe, Dad, Amara replied, her voice finally showing the emotion she had been holding back. They haven't touched me. But these aren't real cops. They're something else entirely. The fake officers were running now, abandoning their unmarked sedan and sprinting toward a line of trees at the edge of the suburban development. But their escape was cut short by the appearance of additional tactical units that had apparently been positioned to prevent exactly this kind of flight. The coordination was flawless, the result of decades of training and the kind of resources that only came into play when the federal government's highest priorities were threatened. Amara Sterling's voice came through the phone again, and this time it carried the cold fury of a father whose child had been threatened and the professional authority of a man who commanded one of the world's most powerful law enforcement agencies. Amara, I want you to stay in your vehicle until Agent Rodriguez gives you the all-clear. These men are going to be taken into custody, and then we're going to find out exactly who sent them and why they thought targeting my daughter was a good idea. As the tactical teams moved in with overwhelming force, Amara watched the fake officers being taken down with the kind of precision that left no doubt about the outcome. They had chosen to target what they thought was an easy victim, a wealthy woman alone on a suburban street. Instead, they had walked into a trap of their own making, one that would expose not just their own crimes but the larger conspiracy that had sent them hunting for prey they should never have approached. The tall officer was on the ground now, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his face pressed against the asphalt as FBI agents read him his rights. His partner was receiving similar treatment 20 yards away, their fake uniforms and false authority stripped away to reveal them as nothing more than common criminals who had made the mistake of targeting someone whose protection extended far beyond what money could buy. But as Amara sat in her Tesla, watching justice unfold with the swift efficiency that her father had spent 30 years perfecting, she knew that this was only the beginning. These men were foot soldiers, not generals, and the real question wasn't who they were but who had sent them and why they had believed that kidnapping the daughter of the FBI director was a risk worth taking. 3 hours after the attempted kidnapping, Amara Sterling sat in a secure conference room at the FBI's Washington field office, watching through one-way glass as her father conducted what would become one of the most consequential interrogations of his career. The tall fake officer, whose real name had been identified as Derek Morrison, a former Army Ranger with ties to private military contractors, sat handcuffed to a metal table, his earlier bravado replaced by the hollow-eyed recognition of a man who understood the magnitude of his mistake. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus Sterling began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of experience in breaking hardened criminals. "You have exactly one opportunity to tell me who hired you to kidnap my daughter. After that opportunity passes, I promise you that the full weight of federal law enforcement will ensure you never see freedom again." Beside Amara, Agent Chun was reviewing surveillance footage from traffic cameras that had captured the fake officer's movements over the past week. "Director Sterling's daughter wasn't randomly selected," she said quietly, pointing to timestamps showing Morrison and his partner conducting surveillance on Amara's offices, her home, and her regular routes. "They've been planning this for at least 10 days, possibly longer." "The question is why?" Amara said, her business instincts kicking in as she analyzed the situation. "Sterling Medical Corporation just closed a merger that will expand our reach into underserved communities across 12 states. We're disrupting the entire healthcare pricing model, making treatments affordable that certain pharmaceutical companies have been price gouging on for years." Agent Chun looked up sharply. "You think this is corporate?" "I think someone doesn't want those hospitals built," Amara replied, her mind racing through the implications. "We're about to provide affordable insulin, cancer treatments, and emergency care to communities that have been systematically denied access. That's going to cost certain companies billions in lost revenue." Through the glass, Morrison was beginning to crack. The shorter officer, identified as Thomas Brennan, a dishonorably discharged police officer from Baltimore, had already started talking in the adjacent interrogation room, and Morrison knew that every minute he remained silent, his partner was likely making deals that would leave him holding the full weight of the conspiracy. "It was supposed to be simple," Morrison finally said, his voice breaking. "Grab the woman, hold her for 48 hours, make her sign some documents transferring her voting shares, then release her unharmed. Nobody was supposed to get hurt." Marcus Sterling leaned forward, his presence filling the interrogation room despite his calm demeanor. "Who hired you?" Morrison hesitated, and in that moment of silence, Amara saw her father deploy a technique she had watched him perfect over years, the strategic use of information to break through resistance. "Your partner Brennan is in the next room telling us about Carlyle Pharmaceutical," Marcus said quietly, "about how they hired you through 3 shell companies to kidnap my daughter and force her to abandon the merger that would destroy their monopoly on diabetes medication. He's also telling us about the other attempts, the brake lines that were supposed to fail, the food poisoning that was supposed to happen at the gala last month, the staged robbery that never materialized because Amara changed her schedule at the last minute." The blood drained from Morrison's face as he realized the depth of the investigation that had been triggered by his failed kidnapping attempt. What he couldn't have known was that Marcus Sterling had been tracking threats against his daughter for months, building a case that needed only one overt act to bring the full force of federal law enforcement down on the conspirators. "I want a lawyer," Morrison said weakly. "You'll get one," Marcus replied, standing with the fluid grace of a man who had gotten what he needed. "But lawyers can't protect you from the consequences of targeting a federal official's family. That's domestic terrorism, Mr. Morrison. That's life without parole." As her father exited the interrogation room, Amara felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in his effectiveness, anger at those who had tried to hurt her, and a growing understanding of just how far certain corporations would go to protect their profits. But there was something else, too, something that had been nagging at her since the surveillance footage had revealed the extent of the conspiracy against her. "Dad," she said as Marcus entered the observation room, "this isn't just about the merger, is it?" Marcus Sterling looked at his daughter, seeing in her the same investigative instincts that had made him one of the FBI's most successful directors, and made a decision that would transform their relationship from father and daughter to something more, partners in the pursuit of justice. "No, baby girl, it's not," he admitted, pulling up classified files on the secure terminal. "Carlyle Pharmaceutical is just one tentacle of something much larger. We've been tracking a network of corporations that have been systematically targeting reformers like you, people who threaten their control over essential services. Healthcare, housing, education. They've built an empire on keeping these things expensive and out of reach. The files revealed a pattern that made Amara's blood run cold. Over the past 5 years, 17 different executives and activists who had tried to reform predatory industries had met with accidents, been charged with fabricated crimes, or simply disappeared. Her name had been added to the list 6 months ago, when Sterling Medical Corporation's revolutionary pricing model had begun threatening the entire pharmaceutical industrial complex. They call themselves the Invisible Hand, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was sharing. We've been building a RICO case for 3 years, but we've never been able to prove the connection between the corporations and the violence. Until now. Until they came after me, Amara said, understanding flooding through her. Until they came after you, Marcus confirmed. Morrison and Brennan are the first live captures we've made. With their testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we can finally bring down the entire network. Through the one-way glass, Morrison sat alone in the interrogation room, unaware that his failed kidnapping attempt had just triggered the unraveling of one of the largest corporate criminal conspiracies in American history. He had thought he was grabbing a wealthy woman for a quick payday. Instead, he had provided the key that would unlock a case that would reshape corporate America. So what happens now? Amara asked. Marcus Sterling looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed paternal pride with professional respect. Now we give them exactly what they didn't want. We accelerate your merger, we build those hospitals, and we use the full power of federal law enforcement to protect every reformer they've targeted. And you, baby girl, are going to be the face of that change. They're going to come after me even harder, Amara said. But there was no fear in her voice, only determination. They're going to try, Marcus agreed. But they've already made their biggest mistake. They've shown us who they are. And now that we can see them, we can stop them. As father and daughter stood together in the FBI field office, watching the machinery of justice begin to turn against those who had thought themselves untouchable, Amara realized that the fake traffic stop had been more than just an attempted kidnapping. It had been the moment when the invisible hand had finally overreached, targeting someone whose protection extended beyond personal bodyguards or corporate security. They had targeted the daughter of justice itself, and that miscalculation was about to cost them everything they had built on the suffering of others. The war room at the FBI's Washington field office had been transformed into a command center that rivaled anything Amara had seen in her corporate career. 23 agents worked at terminals, tracking financial transactions, corporate connections, and communication patterns that sprawled across a digital wall like a spider's web of corruption. At the center of it all, Marcus Sterling orchestrated the investigation with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony of justice. We've got confirmation, Agent Chin announced, pulling up financial records on the main screen. Carlyle Pharmaceutical transferred $12 million through 7 shell companies in the Caymans, eventually landing in accounts controlled by Morrison and Brennan's handler, a man named Victor Cross. Amara studied the data with the analytical mind that had built her fortune. Cross isn't the top, she said, pointing to a pattern in the transfers. Look at the timing. Every payment to Cross is preceded by a larger transfer from a company called Prometheus Holdings. That's your real puppet master. Her father turned to her with surprise and pride. How did you spot that? Because Prometheus Holdings tried to buy Sterling Medical Corporation 18 months ago, Amara replied, pulling up her own files on her secured laptop. They offered 3 times market value, but something felt wrong. When I investigated, I found connections to 16 other hostile takeover attempts against companies that were disrupting established industries. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Agent Rodriguez, the tactical team leader who had arrested Morrison, was the first to speak. If Prometheus Holdings is the umbrella organization for the Invisible Hand, we're talking about a conspiracy that reaches into hundreds of billions of dollars. And thousands of victims, Marcus added grimly. Every patient who couldn't afford insulin, every family that lost someone to overpriced medications, every community denied access to basic health care. They're all victims of this network. Amara's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her chief security officer. Her expression darkened as she read it. Dad, we have a problem. 3 members of my board of directors just received death threats. They're being told to vote against the merger or their families will be targeted. Marcus Sterling's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. Chun, I want protective details on every Sterling Medical Corporation board member immediately. Rodriguez, prepare your teams for multiple simultaneous raids. They're escalating because they're desperate, and desperate criminals make mistakes. As the FBI mobilized its resources, Amara received another message, this one from an unexpected source. The sender identified himself as William Ashford, the CEO of Carlyle Pharmaceutical. Ms. Sterling, the message read, I had no knowledge of the actions taken against you. I've just discovered that certain members of my board authorized this violence without my consent. I want to meet. I have information about Prometheus Holdings that the FBI needs. Amara showed the message to her father, who immediately began making arrangements for a secure meeting. Within an hour, William Ashford sat across from them in a safe house in Alexandria, his usual corporate confidence replaced by the haunted expression of a man who had discovered he was a pawn in someone else's game. 3 years ago, Prometheus Holdings acquired a controlling interest in Carlyle through a hostile takeover. Ashford began, his hands trembling as he pushed a flash drive across the table. They installed their own board members and told me I could remain CEO as long as I didn't ask questions. But when I learned they had targeted you, Ms. Sterling, when I realized they were willing to kidnap and possibly kill to protect their profits, I couldn't remain silent. The flash drive contained what Agent Chun would later describe as the Rosetta Stone of the investigation, emails, financial records, and recorded conversations that revealed the full scope of the Invisible Hands operations. The conspiracy reached into 37 major corporations, controlled assets worth over $2 trillion, and had been responsible for at least 43 deaths that had been staged to look like accidents or suicides. The leader of Prometheus Holdings is a man named Constantine Blackwood, Ashford revealed, his voice barely above a whisper. He's built an empire on human suffering, and he has judges, senators, and police commissioners on his payroll. He believes he's untouchable. He's about to learn otherwise, Marcus Sterling said with quiet determination. As the FBI processed the mountain of evidence Ashford had provided, Amara made a decision that would define the next phase of the battle. She called an emergency press conference, standing before the cameras with the poise of someone who had faced down predators and emerged victorious. Today, I was nearly kidnapped by men hired to stop Sterling Medical Corporation from providing affordable health care to millions of Americans, she began, her voice carrying across the packed press room. This attack wasn't just against me. It was against every patient who deserves access to life-saving medications, every family struggling with medical debt, every community that has been abandoned by a system that prioritizes profits over people. She held up photographs of Morrison and Brennan being arrested. These men were hired by a network of corporations that have conspired to keep healthcare expensive and out of reach. They call themselves the Invisible Hand, but today we're making them visible. Today, we're exposing them to the light of justice. The press conference went viral within minutes, with hashtag InvisibleHandExposed trending globally. Whistleblowers began coming forward from within the targeted corporations, providing additional evidence of price-fixing, market manipulation, and worse. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. In his fortress-like estate in Connecticut, Constantine Blackwood watched the press conference with growing rage. He had built his empire over 30 years, carefully orchestrating the exploitation of human needs for maximum profit. He had considered himself above the law, beyond the reach of justice. But as he watched Amara Sterling speak, as he saw the FBI raids beginning at Prometheus Holdings subsidiaries across the country, he realized that his greatest mistake hadn't been targeting the daughter of the FBI director. His greatest mistake had been underestimating the power of truth when wielded by someone with the courage to speak it. Sir, his head of security entered the room, his face pale. The FBI is at the gate. They have a warrant for your arrest. Constantine Blackwood, the man who had orchestrated suffering on an industrial scale, looked out his window at the federal agents surrounding his estate and understood that his invisible empire had finally been exposed to the one thing it couldn't survive, the light of justice. In the war room at the FBI field office, Amara stood beside her father as they watched the arrests unfold across the country. 47 executives, 16 board members, and over 100 co-conspirators were being taken into custody in coordinated raids that represented the largest corporate criminal takedown in American history. "You know they'll try to retaliate," Marcus said quietly. "Even from prison. These people have resources. Let them try," Amara replied, her voice steady with the confidence of someone who had faced her worst fears and emerged stronger. "We've shown the world who they are. We've proven that their power was always an illusion, built on fear and maintained through violence. They're not invisible anymore, and that's what terrifies them most." As the sun set over Washington, casting long shadows across the city, Amara Sterling understood that the fake traffic stop had been more than just a failed kidnapping. It had been the catalyst for a revolution in corporate accountability. The men who had tried to force her from her car had thought they were hunting prey. Instead, they had awakened a predator of a different kind, the relentless pursuit of justice that would reshape American business for generations to come.